For the next 2 weeks, we're focusing on cultural geographies. This week, our emphasis will be on culture and religion. Next week, our emphasis will be on culture and language. For this week in Knox and Marston, you're responsible for pages 144 through 158, which is the introduction to culture in general and then talks a little bit about religion. In addition, this week is chapter 3 in Doublage. Some of the key concepts that we'll cover are cultural geography, cultural complexes, cultural regions, cultural systems, and diaspora. Next week, when we look at language, we'll talk more about cultural hearths, identity, and Americanization. Culture is a complex topic, and I bet if I asked each of you to give me a definition, each of those definitions would be slightly different. In a general way, we can define culture as a shared set of meanings that are lived through the material and symbolic practices of everyday life. This can include values, beliefs, practices, and ideas about religions, language, gender, and sexuality, just to name a few. Culture is interwoven with social, political, economic, and historical factors. While it is true that globalization has had an effect on culture, and that you can find a McDonald's almost anywhere now, places still tend to put their own stamp on cultural trends. Please read The Culture of Hip-Hop in your text as an example. Space, place, and landscape shape cultures, and at the same time, cultures can shape that space, place, and landscape. Culture, therefore, is the ever-ongoing and evolving process, while geography is the context in which that process or culture occurs. Some geographers divide culture into two categories, folk culture and popular culture. Folk culture refers to the traditional practices of smaller rural groups, while in pop culture or popular culture, the emphasis is on larger groups. Carl Sauer was a geographer from Berkeley, California, who was interested in researching the ways in which cultures express themselves on the landscape. He separated the natural landscape from the cultural landscape. Take a look at this. So, for instance, the natural landscape, the factors that affect it are geological, climatic, vegetational, and then over time what happens is that the forms we see are weather and land, like surface changes, soil changes, drainage, minerals, erosion and deposition along the seas and the coasts, and the type of plants that exist. And so all of those things compose the natural landscape. He was really interested in what the cultural landscape looks like. So he said that culture impacts the natural landscape and over time makes these forms in this column here. So for instance, we have differences in population density and population mobility, which have an impact on what the natural landscape looks like. And he was also interested in other forms such as housing and plans and structures and production and communication. So when we talk about the cultural landscape from the Carl Sauer perspective, we're looking at what sort of modifications or changes over time have humans made to the natural landscape as the medium. As implied by the name, historical geography then refers to the geography of the past and was an attempt to understand the human footprint or impact on the landscape. A cultural trait is one single aspect of the complex of routine practices that make up a particular cultural group. It's important to remember, though, that many cultural traits are not unique to just one group. Rites of passage, then, are those life events in a culture that are recognized and or celebrated to mark a key transition in life. So I bet you guys could think of quite a few of those. The Jewish community celebrates bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah. And another one that's quite common is going ahead and actually having your wedding and going through that ceremony. So that's pretty common. When the traits that are a characteristic of a particular group get combined, they're called a cultural complex. So not complex in terms of something that's complex and hard to understand, but just like a grouping. a complex. A culture region, then, is an area where the cultural practices, beliefs, or values are practiced by the majority of the inhabitants in that region. Okay, so here's an example from your textbook. On the left is a cultural trait of men in Niger, and on the right, a coming-of-age ceremony in South Korea. And I like this question: apply your knowledge, identify traits characteristic of your cultural group. So how would you define your culture and what those traits are? If we take a look at a map of the United States and cultural regions based on religion, we can see that there are lots of sort of broad trends. The whole southeast part of the United States can be generalized as being part of the Southern Baptist cultural region. If we look out more towards Utah and southern Idaho, we can see that there's a Mormon cultural region. So it's important, though, that we look at these broad patterns, but don't just automatically assume that everybody who lives there is going to be of that cultural trait or have the same cultural trait. So interestingly, your book likes to say that there's 4 major religions, and I included a video that I wanted you guys to watch that actually talks about the 5 major religions. And the reason for that is that your book sort of lumps Christianity and Judaism together, mostly because they originated in present-day Israel and Jordan. However, Islam originated from Western Arabia, Hinduism from the Indus region of Pakistan, and Buddhism from India. Sources of origin, interestingly, were also cultural hearth areas. And then we can define religion as being a belief system and a set of practices that recognize the existence of a power higher than humankind. Diaspora is the spatial distribution of a previously homogeneous group due to involuntary and voluntary movement of people who bring their religious beliefs with them to new places. Lastly, this map shows the world distribution of major religions. It's important to note that at this scale, the map can be only a generalization since there are numerous variations in religion among places. However, it's interesting to note the broad general patterns and the location of different belief systems, since religion plays a large role in society and can impact health, birth rates, economics, politics, etc. I would recommend that you guys take the 5 major religions and make sure that you understand sort of what their major beliefs are, their history, and a generalized ability to describe where they are in the world. That won't necessarily be a particular quiz question, but it's something that any educated person should know about the other major religions in the world.